Well, there you go. If you're a Cal Berkeley Bear, then you know that fight song.
Sure
That takes you way back, I'm sure. And if you are a baseball fan, you are going to love today's show. Hi, everybody. I'm Harper LeBel, and welcome back to 100 Yards of Football. This is Take 5 with Steven Travers, along with Logan Landers, our producer and engineer. And Steven, we got a special guest today. Rocky Shone is one of those guys that got to play at Cal Berkeley. He was good enough at the high school level, and we'll talk about that, and then playing in college. And then he ended up doing something that was rather unique. We're going to talk, if you're an Italian baseball fan, we're going to talk about going overseas and really being at the root and the grassroots effort to try to spring up a international quality team that the Italians, that Americans, that Koreans, that the Japanese, that on an international level, we can compete with the rest of the world. So Rocky Shone is a part of that. And Steven, I'm so grateful that you were able to bring Rocky onto the show. There's a lot we're going to learn about the game of baseball, and especially from the international perspective. Thank you so much for getting with Rocky and getting him on today.
Yeah, thanks, Harper. Well, it's apropos that Rocky be our guest today because he's the second in what I guess we could call a trinity of international guests. And it's appropriate that we be doing this at this time because the World Baseball Classic recently concluded, and Italy did very well in the WBC. Several weeks ago, we had my friend Barry Kuzminski on, and he gave us an in-depth look at Canadian baseball culture because he played on the Canadian Olympic team. Today, we have my friend Rocky Shone, who's going to talk about Italian baseball culture. And next week, we're going to have my friend Derek White, former Major League Baseball player who's a scout for the Japanese professional major leagues. He's going to talk about Japanese and Asian baseball culture. So, Rocky, today you're in the middle way between Canada and Japan. We're going to be talking about Italy, but I want to thank you so much for being our guest and taking time to be on Take 5 with Steven Travers.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, Rocky, we appreciate you being on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the present and the future, but let's start at the past. Baseball for you, you grew up in California. Talk a little bit about your experience and when you first loved baseball, and was it comparing it to football or basketball? Were you a track guy? Did you like street hockey? Were you a volleyball guy? Did you love to surf? Tell us a little bit about the beginning in your athletic career, so to speak, and how you were able to blossom from a very early age to become a really a college level player over just a short period of time.
Yeah, well, back in the day when I was growing up, you played sport according to the season you were in. So the summer you played baseball, and then you went to football, and then you went to basketball. And so I played them all, and until everybody grew up and got taller, and I didn't. So until I played basketball through my freshman year in high school. I was a point guard, started on the JV team as a freshman. And, but I knew I was already tall. I was tall when I was young, and then I was short when I was old. And anyway, I knew I wasn't getting any taller. So I started playing winter ball after when I was, I guess, a sophomore in high school. I started playing for the San Anselmo Merchants. And so I was, I guess, 15. I was basically a bullpen catcher, but I was playing well enough. I started playing in the games. And so that's actually, but I started playing baseball like everybody, playing Little League and, playing at the grammar school. And, as soon as school was out, we'd go and play baseball until it was football season. Then we'd play football.
Well, I got 100 questions about that, but did you have a Adirondack, or was it a Hillerich and Bradsby 27-ounce wood bat back in those days? It was all wood, right?
Louisville Slugger. We used to go down. Steve will remember this. Used to go down to Tavishi Berzati, T&B, in downtown San Rafael Sports Shop, and down in the basement They had all the wood bats, and you'd pull out Nellie Foxes. You could hardly get your hand around. They're so thick, and Roger Maris model, and all the different players. At that time, the Giants had just moved. I was born in '48, so I started really playing baseball in '58, '59, '60. The Giants had just moved to San Francisco in '58, and Willie Mays and all that going on. It was a pretty exciting time. You had to be a baseball player. Plus, following Willie, Willie's, if he's not the greatest ball player of all time, I don't know who else is. Maybe, I don't know. He couldn't pitch, but he could do everything else.
Just about, no kidding. Willie McCovey, you had Bobby Bonds, excuse me. Back at Juan Marshall, back in those early years.
Orlando Cepeda.
Before they played in Candlestick, was it Kezar Stadium that the Giants made home? Is that right?
Yeah, they played. They played at an old. What was the name of that park?
Seal Stadium.
Seal Stadium, yeah.
Seal, okay.
The old San Francisco Seals. Joe DiMaggio played there before the Yankees signed him. But that's a parking lot now, or a big park where that used to be. But it was actually kind of in beer town in San Francisco. All the beer breweries and everything were right around that Pabst Blue Ribbon. When you go to the ballpark, you see the big Pabst Blue Ribbon sign.
There you go. Yeah, you always have to have sponsorship, I guess, right? Early on. As a young kid, do you remember going to the ballpark and just having it be peanuts, popcorn, get your hot dog programs? What the guy with the hat that had the little ribbon around it, and there was a little bit of pageantry back in those days. Do you remember getting to go to your first game?
I went to the old Seal Stadium, and then as soon as Candlestick opened, and that was a trip because it was freezing cold at Candlestick. You'd have to take blankets and everything else for a day game.
Well, first memories of actually going to a game, and then high school. That's usually where the player really begins to hone in. They may be, as you mentioned, an early bloomer, and you were full size at 14, 15, 16, and then other guys started catching up. Was that something that you noticed that, like, look, early on, I know I can play. I'm as good as everybody my age. I could probably play on the JV or the varsity. Were there experiences like that you had when you were growing up?
Yeah, baseball, I never thought about it. I just played it. I never, later on, I had to, actually kind of think about it. I played baseball. I kind of like to think I played baseball like Willie Mays did. I just went out and did it. And later on, I ended up getting injured at Cal and had to actually think about how to throw and how to do things. But growing up, you just did it. You don't think about how do you walk or how do you run. And that's how I played baseball. I just went out and just played the game and had, good success. I like to tell my wife, I wish she met me, I guess I was 21, and I was playing for a semi-pro team in San Rafael when we met. And I always tell her, I wish she'd seen me when I was 18, when I was really good.
What a difference 3 years makes, right? From 21 to 18. Well, when you're 14, you go out for the freshman team, or do they have a JV there that you made? And I guess that's where you first learn, isn't it? Hey, your footwork, kid. You got to go right foot, left foot when you throw, and then you got to learn to hit to the opposite field. You got to learn how to hit a curveball. There's certain things that you don't see when you're 10, 11, 12 that you're exposed to at 14 and 15. What was that like for you?
I kept hitting. If you throw me low and away, I had to pop up to right field because didn't know how to hit the outside pitch. Didn't know how to wait. Didn't know how to wait. I'd always get ahead, and so I did have to. I had to learn things like that. Yeah, throwing and things like that. I just did, and never thought about footwork or much about that. I was pretty quick behind the plate. Yeah, later I had a good catching coach. I when I first started Little League, I was pretty terrible in the field. I was a pretty good hitter. And so I was playing second base in the outfield, and somebody figured, well, throw him behind the plate. And anyway, I really enjoyed that because you're involved every pitch. I'd kind of zone out playing second base or outfield because you wouldn't get anything to do for 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I've always said that if it wasn't for catching, I don't know if I would have been a baseball player because it's kind of a boring game. I mean, Steve's a pitcher, so he's involved, but nothing happens until he pitches, but nothing happens until I throw the ball back to him. So you're the two most integral pieces of the puzzle. And anyway, so just went from there. But I did, you learn how to wait on the ball, you get good coaching. Actually, I don't know back then you didn't get a lot of specific coaching, guy. You just kind of got thrown out on the field. It was, I think I learned more from other ball players growing up and playing semi-pro and get taught, the fine points of the game. I remember once I was playing for this summer league team. I was 18, we'd gone back to Grand Junction, Colorado. There's a guy named back there, Sam Simplizio, really well-known guy. I guess he was supposed to be the heir apparent to Joe DiMaggio before Mickey Mantle took the spot. But I guess he was a great ball player, and Grand Junction had a great ballpark and a great tradition. Yeah. And we ended up bussing back there because I think there was a plane strike. And, I was 18. Everyone else, I think the next youngest guy was maybe 23. And so I'm with all these men and, they'd play AAA and AA and this and that. And I was just a rookie kid. Anyway, we get back there and the coach pinch hits me for the pitcher. And the pitcher, as Joanne Selma says, grab a bat, Rock, you're going to hit. And so I grab a bat, and the pitcher says, "What the hell, Joe? What are you putting the kid in for me for?" And the kid can hit. And anyway, so this is my baptism into fire. The pitcher's, yelling at me like he shouldn't even be out here. And now I'm going to play, I'm facing some, I don't know if he's a college pitcher or whatever, but he's a good pitcher. And nobody's hitting him too well. And we're playing in Grand Junction, Colorado. And I've never played at elevation. And I hit a ball, outside pitch. I drive it to right, and I'm hoping it falls. But I'm playing at elevation, and it hits off the wall in right center. And anyway, I slide into third with 2 outs. And I'm thinking I'm a hero because it's like a 1-to-1 game. And, I pop up and expect the guys to be cheering. And they're all yelling at me because I slid into third and there were 2 outs. And that meant, I didn't even know I know I'm not supposed to make the third out at third base, but I find out that it's because I had to slide. If I'd gone in standing up, it's okay. You hit that triple. But if you slid and meant it was too close and you should have stopped at second because it's, anyway, they gave me a world of shit. And that's when you learned in a hurry that some of the unwritten rules of baseball, which still drive me crazy, when I watch big league ball, guys get thrown out at third with 2 outs and it's like, wait, you got to make it. If you got to slide, it's too close. So anyway, that was baptism into fire.
No kidding. Rock, you mentioned earlier Willie Mays, Joe DiMaggio, Roger Maris's bat and all that. Who are your early heroes and guys that you would look up to? Was Yogi Berra, because he was a catcher, was he one of those guys that you said, man, I'd love to have a game like him? Were there any other guys that meant a lot to you when you were growing up that you go, I want to emulate my game or at least learn a little bit about it from them?
Yeah, my dad always called me Yogi, but I was actually, Yogi was playing left field by the time, I was catching and growing up. I was, with the Giants. I liked Hobie Landreth, who no one's ever even heard of if you're not a Giants fan, but he was a catcher back in '58. And so, I was a Hobie Landreth fan. And, then, of course, later on when I was in high school and college, by then Johnny Bench was playing, and he's the epitome of catcher. He used to throw the ball down to second. I remember I had a pretty good arm, and the coach would tell me to throw it by the pitcher's ear, and it would get to second base. And I could do that. But Johnny Bench threw it by the pitcher's shoulder because he really had a hose.
Yeah.
And anyway, those are there's great ball players back
He
then.
made the cover of Sports Illustrated, and it was from behind the plate. It almost as if the camera was on the mound, and he's throwing it down to second. You just see the power that he had in his arm and the muscularity that he had as a young guy. And the Reds were just becoming who they were, right? Just some of these young players that they were bringing up, and Concepcion, Geronimo, some guy named Pete Rose, right? Joe Morgan was with the Houston Colt 45s before he was with the Reds. But just the building of a franchise back in those days. But you're right, Johnny was one of those difference makers.
Yeah, he's the greatest. But I did meet Yogi Berra some years later, and he came out to Marin County. Anyway, he was the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. He heard I was a catcher, and he came over to me and started talking to me. And anyway, I'm still thrilled with, just that I got to talk to Yogi Berra. And we spent, 10 or 15 minutes together. And, I'd already finished playing ball in Italy and everything else. I was in my mid-30s or something. And but he treated me like an equal. And, him with, 9 World Series rings?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. What a guy.
Did he give you any yogi-isms? Did he tell you it ain't over till it's over? Did he tell you that baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical? Did he give you anything that that would make you laugh like what he says to everybody else? It's hilarious.
I wish. I'd already read all the books. So, my favorite was that I still use is you let's not go to that restaurant. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too busy.
Yeah.
I was gonna quote that one, Rocky. But I wanted to ask you, I think you say you were 15 years old and you were playing on, I think you said on a Colt League team.
It was a Babe Ruth. They didn't have Colt.
Babe Ruth League. Okay, that makes sense.
That's right, man.
Along comes this fellow. He's grew up in Los Angeles, and somehow his dad gets a job with the phone company in San Francisco, and he moves to this fairly new housing development known as Terra Linda. And he arrives on the baseball scene, and he's your teammate. His name is Bill Spaceman Lee. He's not yet known as the Spaceman.
He wasn't the Spaceman.
So tell us about.
He was a Spaceman, but nobody knew it yet.
Tell us about. Give me some anecdotes on the early Bill Lee, who was your teammate and your rival. Both you were teammates in summer ball, American Legion ball, but your rival when you were at San Rafael High, and he's at Terra Linda High. So give me a little overview on that.
Well, the main reason I became a great friend of Bill Lee was I was a catcher and he was a pitcher, and he needed someone to throw to. And so he never said that, but I'm sure that's the reason. So, he lived in Terra Linda, I guess 3 or 4 miles from Alberts Park, where we played. And that was about a 5-minute walk from my house. I lived in San Rafael. And Bill would say, let's meet at 10 tomorrow, and we'll work out. And so I'd be there at like 5 to 10 or 10 to 10. And Bill had already been there. You could not beat Bill Lee to a ball field. Didn't matter what time he got there. And he'd be hitting. He was so he was a couple of years older. So I was 15. He was 16, but he was almost 17 because his birthday's in December. And so he was 16, but almost 17. And when we met in that first year, and when I got to the ballpark, he's left-handed, of course, and he had his mitt on his head, and he was hitting pop-ups to himself, and then he'd take the hat off his, take the mitt off his head and catch the pop-up, put it back on, hit another pop-up, drop the bat, take the hat off, catch a pop-up.
Didn't he catch it behind his back?
No. But anyway,
I know he did that. I know there's video of him doing that, but not yet. Huh?
He probably could. But anyway, I didn't even have a coach in high school who could hit good pop-ups. Bill could really hit good pop-ups. And the other thing he was trying to do, he was standing at home plate, and there's a 380 sign in center field at Alberts Park, and he was trying to throw the ball out of the ballpark. He could throw it out to left, to right, but he wanted to be able to throw it over that 380 sign. And I don't know, you'll have to ask him. He probably did. I never saw him do it. I saw him hit the 380 sign, but I don't know if he ever threw it over. It was on a pretty high backstop. And because the backstop at Alberts in center field, they had a little league field out there that hit the other way, or a softball field.
Yeah.
So it had a big backstop for that other home plate. And, but yeah, you couldn't beat Bill to a ball field. And he was he's a pitcher, but he was a good hitter. He played first base when he wasn't pitching. And, he hit some dings in the bigs, and was a pretty good hitter. And,
did he throw fairly hard at that time? Because he told me that he actually could throw pretty hard. He just purposely changed speeds most of the time because he said it was an easier way to get outs.
Yeah, that was a secret. I'm surprised he let you know, because to most people, he still says he never threw hard. He never showed the good stuff unless you were a good hitter. There's still kids around Marin County that can't believe Bill Lee played in the big leagues. They said he had nothing. I faced him in Little League and in Pony League and in high school. He had nothing. And he had nothing because they weren't good hitters. They never saw his good stuff. But, he could throw 90 anytime he wanted to. If you didn't deserve 90, you didn't get 90. And he'd just let you get yourself out. And, you'd hit a hard grounder to second, and you think, I hit the ball pretty good off of Bill Lee, and you're out on one pitch. And,
instead of 3 or 4 pitches or 5 pitches.
He pitched the same way in the big leagues as he did. He just had, instead of 3 good hitters, he probably had 7 good hitters. I'm sure, some of the 7, 8, 9 hitters back then, he didn't have much respect for either, because he was always he was a great pitcher. He wasn't a thrower. He was a pitcher.
My favorite Bill Lee story is he was like in the 1974. He was at the prime of his career, and they're facing the California Angels, who were not a good hitting team. He says, I could shut those guys out in the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel. And Dick Williams was the manager of the Angels, and he comes up with this really dumb idea, which is for the Angels to take batting practice with wiffle balls and wiffle bats in the lobby of the Sheraton in Boston before playing the Angels in a night game at Fenway, and they got cameras and taking pictures. And that night, Lee beats them 4-0. And Williams was like, hey, he showed it to us. I don't know why Dick Williams allowed himself to play into that. But, Williams admired Bill Lee because he was his first manager, and he knew that Bill was a gamer. Let me ask you about this great ballpark, because I played there. I had glory days there. You had glory days there. It was built in the 1940s, I think right after World War II. There was a guy named Albert. There's another building in Santa Fe called the Albert Building. I really don't know who Albert is, but I don't know what the story is, but this field. And it's really one of the really great high school showcase fields in the Bay Area. Albert Park and Albert Field. Tell Harper and our audience about this ballpark, which wasn't quite that old when you were playing. It was only about 15 to 20 years old when you started playing there. It wasn't that old. It became a little bit older later. It's still there, and they still play there. Tell us about Albert Field.
Yeah, the Santa Fe Pacific's minor league team.
Sure.
Played there. Bill played for him, 5 years ago when he was 70 something.
I announced the game, Rocky.
Yeah. But Bill's not playing for the Bananas because they don't want him to die on the mound, because that's, I think, always Bill's desire is to die with his uniform on. But he might get that, but I guess Savannah Bananas don't want him to do it on their dime, because he can still throw the ball.
Oh, I know.
Pretty amazing. But Albert's Field, when I was 12, 13, 14, they used to have really good barnstorming teams come through and play. And, probably because the Giants had just gotten there and, there was already the tradition of playing ball and not having to go all the way to San Francisco. So they bring in all these barnstorming teams. And, I was pretty quick, and they'd hit the foul balls over the backstop, and, I'd run them all down. And then, you bring them back and, they give you a dime or something for every ball you brought back. And, I would get one ball. I wouldn't bring it back until, the inning was over. I'd get sometimes 3 or 4 foul balls in one half inning and bring them all back and beat all the other kids to the balls. And, but there's really good ball being played there. And later on, when I was playing for the Santa Fe Braves, and this guy, Joe Anselmo, was the coach, they brought in, I played against Satchel Paige, and Satchel was pitching, and he got me out like he got everybody else out. But he got me out like Bill Lee used to get out the big leaguers. I hit a hard grounder to short, and I thought, wow, I hit pretty hard off old Satchel Paige. But, he was in his 60s, I guess, at that time, 65 or something. And, but he could still throw. It was pretty impressive, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is incredible. I did not know that Satchel Paige ever played baseball in Marin County. But Marin County does have a long history of barnstorming baseball, town ball. And, you live in a little place called Nicasio, which is in rural West Marin County, not far from the Pacific Ocean. Not what people think of when they think of Marin County as being a bedroom community of San Francisco, but rather your area is farmland, cow pastures, a wonderful restaurant called the Nicasio Inn, where they have barbecues and outdoor music. It's just a magnificent place. And it has a long history. Back in the 1920s in West Marin, in Bolinas, and in some other areas where you live now, there were barnstorming teams that would come through. And Babe Ruth played there. Lou Gehrig played there. Lefty Gomez played there. And Lefty Gomez, actually, he was one of the reasons that a lot of these players would come back there, because he was from the Bay Area and he knew about this area, and he would sort of say, this is a nice area to go to, and let's schedule some games there. And this Lefty Gomez became part of the culture of West Marin baseball. In fact, I played in a Babe Ruth league on what was called Lefty Gomez Field, which was in Fairfax, not far from Nicasio. That field was built long after you were, playing youth baseball in Marin. But yeah, that is just incredible. Any other famous people that came through and played baseball when you were growing up?
I'm trying to think. Well, Lefty Gomez, I mean, he grew up on the other side of the bay, but Marin County likes to take credit for a lot of lefties. And I got to know Lefty because George Wolfman and Lefty Gomez were my coach at Cal. They were really close friends. And Lefty used to tell me stories. He used to come and speak at every I'm sure you did the same thing at SC and such, but you'd have a baseball luncheon or breakfast. And because George knew Lefty so well, Lefty would come, and Lefty was the greatest storyteller, bar none.
Yes.
And he'd come and, tell his stories of, pitching in the big leagues, and, what was some of his best stories. Well, oh gosh, I can't remember them all now, but he used to, I remember one time he was talking about, the umpire said, how come you're not pitching? He was on the mound and he wasn't throwing the ball. He was just kind of looking in. And he said, you can't hit it until I throw it. And so he was just wasting time, I guess. And then somebody asked him once, how do you feel the line drive? And he says, what did he say? He says, you duck and hope it doesn't hit you. Things like that. But he was he had a million stories.
Yeah. Well, his nickname was El Goofy.
Yeah, he was a rep for Spalding, I think.
He's probably Joe DiMaggio's best friend with the Yankees, and I think he kind of protected DiMaggio. They would go out on the town, and if writers or fans they'd be at the 21 or the Troubadour or some fancy place, and Gomez would he'd be the guy who would have all the anecdotes and keep the fans and the writers involved in his conversation so that DiMaggio could keep his privacy. But when I was 8 years old, I got to tell this story. When I was 8 years old, my very first year of Little League, this is in San Anselmo, and this is Memorial Park in San Anselmo. And I've never played an organized game. I'm with the Dodgers, midget league, 8 years old. And I show up, and there's 7,000 people at Memorial Park. It's like, holy cow. And I'm thinking, wow, I didn't realize midget league was so popular. I thought they were all out to see us play. Well, they were there because Joe DiMaggio was there. And it was the very first day of what was called the Joe DiMaggio League, which was a summer league that Al Endress, the Redwood coach, started for kids 16 to 18. And they were playing at Memorial Park, and this was in conjunction with all the Little Leagues and the start of Little League season. And DiMaggio was there, and I remember seeing DiMaggio. And you would see DiMaggio at games. In fact, Rocky, I saw Joe DiMaggio at a Cal game that you played, and I was, I think, the bat boy, because I was the bat boy for the Cal team. I think your senior year. I was 10 years old, and maybe 5 or 10 games, because my dad knew George Wolfman. Joe DiMaggio was at the game, and I had a baseball. One of you guys gave me a baseball. I had him sign it. You know what I did with that baseball? I took it out, took batting practice with it. That was brilliant. Yeah, but there was so much going on. But you played on some great teams. Who was your coach at Centerville High?
Jackie Sims. Jack Sims. He was a good ball player, but I guess he was a great football player. He played at St. Mary's. He was a triple threat tailback at St. Mary's back in those days, and St. Mary's, played at the same level as Cal Berkeley. So
Right.
he was a good ball player. He pretty much threw the bats and balls on the field and said, "Go out and play, guys." But
My dad actually played baseball at Cal in the 30s for Clint Evans. That's the field is named Evans Diamond. He actually played for Clint Evans. He was there with the guy from Tiburon, Sam Chapman.
yeah,
I played football and baseball. And my dad said back in the day, the St. Mary's Cal game would be a sellout, the baseball game.
yeah. Sam Chapman was probably the greatest athlete ever to come out of Marin County, because he was one of the best football players of all time in college, and then he was a great ball player for Philly. And back then, you're asking some of the players I didn't know. There's a guy named Art Shalleck who played at TAM.
Yeah.
He played with the Yankees.
Yeah.
I went to school from from Davidson, 7th grade on, with his daughter. His daughter, they lived out at Peacock Gap. And so Nancy Shalleck. And she married a good buddy of mine back, when we were like 19, or got married early. But anyway, yeah, he was a little guy, but he could really throw. Yeah, there's a lot of good ball players, a lot of AAA, a lot of guys who, Don Lauders was a famous shortstop and played, I guess, a lot of AAA ball. And he was there. Yeah, there's Artie Shalleck. And he was some Rod Gasper was a third baseman.
Wait a minute. Rod Gaspar, the New York Mets?
No.
Oh.
It was but yeah, same name, I guess. But
Okay.
different guy. But he was another guy I played with coming up. And, these guys were all in their 30s, and when I was the kid.
So you were rivals with Terralinda. Did you face Bill much when you were in high school?
Yeah, just 1 year. He was, when I was a freshman, you couldn't play varsity. And I started playing varsity as a sophomore. And Bill was a senior at Terralinda.
Okay.
And that was the only, I can't really remember what happened, but he beat everybody. So I imagine he beat us too. I remember that as a sophomore, the year before playing with Bill, I tore up that 15, 16, 17-year-old league. And nobody could hardly get me out. And so I'm a sophomore at San Rafael, and I played well as a freshman, but now I'm a sophomore and I'm hot shit. I'm thinking, and I'm batting fourth in the lineup. I got Danny Bell ahead of me. He was a good ball player. He was the senior catcher, so they hid me out in right field because he was all league as for a couple of years, and he was kind of like. He taught me a lot about catching too, Danny Bell. And Danny was a good ball player. And but anyway, I'm batting fourth. And, I think towards the end of the year, I ended up finally getting some hits. But Jackie kept me batting fourth all year. I hit the shit out of the ball at 2 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, when the game started, I couldn't hit worth shit. But I was a great hitter in BP.
What about American Legion?
I think I finally got my average up to 250 by getting, 5 or 6 hits in the last 2 or 3 games.
Did you catch Bill in American Legion baseball?
Then that summer, that's when I was started catching full time with Bill. That's let's see, Don Lucas was the coach.
Yeah.
He was the football coach at Linda, but he also coached the baseball team. And anyway, Don Lucas was a good coach.
Yeah.
And so we had, he put together, like an all-star team from Marin Catholic, San Rafael, Terra Linda. And we had one kid, Dave Beswick. He was a young college kid. He was going to Santa Clara. He was from Marin Catholic, but he was a freshman at Santa Clara, and he was on our team. And I think you got to be up. You couldn't be 19. You had to be
16 to 18.
Yeah, but that was Dewey Forey's older brother, John Forey, was on that team. But yeah, Bill was the star pitcher on that team and played first when he wasn't pitching.
What about Bill's brother Paul? Did he ever play with or against him? Was he?
Paul was the kid brother who just hung around. Yeah, nobody paid any attention to him, but Paul was a great athlete.
Yeah,
and but he was a couple of years younger, so he was just a kid brother. We didn't know how talented he was back in the day. That guy could run like the wind, though. That guy, Paul Lee, was really fast.
Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, Rocky. I'm sure it was a lot different back in those days, but the recruiting process. When did you have an idea that you were good enough in high school that you might be able to play at the next level? And how did schools, the college schools, get in touch with players back then? Was it, the way it is today? Were there scouts that were there looking at some of the guys? You mentioned your catcher when you were a sophomore who was a really good player. What was that process like?
Actually, I played a lot of football, and I got recruited way more for football than I did for baseball. I got recruited for baseball by Stanford. Ray Young was the coach at Stanford, and he recruited me for Stanford. And and I got letters and calls from SF State and San Jose State and Santa Clara. But I was raised, if you didn't play for Cal or Stanford, you didn't play for anybody, or SC or UCLA. I mean, those are the names that everyone talked about. And so I was getting recruited for football, and I was thinking I was going to go to Arizona, University of Arizona, for football. And I ended up, there's a guy, Greg Tellis from Tam High, and he was pitching against San Rafael, and I was a senior. And it turned out George Wolfman was in the stands, which I didn't know who George was. And our basketball coach, Mike Diaz, was the star point guard for Cal. And in like 54 or 55, this is now in 66. And anyway, he knew George Wolfman. George had just started coaching. He was the Clint Evans assistant coach back in 55. And so he knew Mike Diaz from their days at Cal, and he saw Mike sitting in the stands. So George sat next to Mike Diaz, and Mike knew me, because I played some basketball, and he was following the baseball team. I don't know. He didn't come to all the games, but he's at that game. And anyway, Greg Tellis threw a 2-hitter and lost 2-1 because I had a home run and a double, and drove in both runs. And we beat Greg Tellis 2-1. And that's how I got into Cal. I got, all of a sudden, Greg Tellis ended up going to Cal on a ride. And I got in because I was the only guy who could hit Greg Tellis. And George got me in. And I carried my books back and forth to school. I never opened them. And, so I didn't have much of a GPA. Luckily, I had a pretty good score on my, test scores and stuff. And anyway, I got in back in the day. I don't know what the rule is now, but back then I was a 2%er. You could have 2% of your undergraduates, didn't have to qualify with all the grades and everything. So I got in on my SATs, and because I could hit Greg Tellis.
There you go. Well, kids, when you listen to Rocky talk about his college days, remember it's okay to open the book. You can do that. All right.
Well, I learned at Cal. That's the thing at Cal. They want you to flunk out because there's 1,000 guys who want your spot.
Yeah.
So they don't give you any help if you don't. I mean, if you go and ask them for help, they'll help you. But no one's looking over your shoulder. If you don't show up to class, nobody cares. Hurry up, get this loser out of here. We got some people who want that spot. So you don't get any assistance whatsoever. So back at Cal, I'm sure it's still the same. If you didn't know how to write a good cohesive English, you had to take subject A. And if you didn't pass subject A, that was a no credit course to learn the stuff you were supposed to learn in high school and grammar school. And half the student body had to take subject A. I don't know, probably more have to take it now. But I had to take subject A, and I labored over my first draft and my first paper, and I think I got a F+ or a D-, something like that. And but you don't get out of there until you can ace your subject A. Otherwise, you have to repeat it. And you just have to keep repeating it till you flunk out, I guess. So I took it one semester, finished my subject A, and, anyway, I ended up doing well at Cal. I figured out, I remember as a freshman, girls won't even look at you when you go to college if you're a freshman. And because all the freshman girls want to go out with the older guys, the upperclassmen, and no sophomore or junior would get caught, going out with a freshman. So if you wanted to find female companionship at college, you had to go to a high school kid. But, you just came from high school. That you couldn't go back and, go back into those waters as a freshman. So you just, didn't ever talk to a girl for the whole year as a freshman. So some upperclassman came to me in my freshman year, a gal, and wanted to study with me. So I thought, oh, that sounds good. All, of course, she wanted to do was study with me, but I didn't know at the time. But anyway, I guess I was doing an anthropology class, and I guess I asked a lot of questions and was really engaged. And she figured, oh, this kid really knows his stuff. So we studied together. And I really enjoyed anthropology. It was one of those classes we took it in Wheeler Hall. There's 2,000 of us in the class, I think. And anyway, then you fill out all your blue books and, you get a grade. Anyway, she got an A- and I got a C-. And I was a guy who was tutoring her. I knew everything, but I didn't know how to take a test. I threw everything against the wall and hoped some of it stuck. And I found out that, that's not the way you take a test. I did find out the way to take a test, and here's a nugget for all your listeners. Is one year somebody told me, do an outline before so you get all your thoughts in order. Do an outline and then write your blue book. That way you don't have too much filler. And so I did an outline, and I probably had, I did a lot of studying, but I also crammed like everybody else. So I was exhausted. I think I had 2 or 3 finals in 2 days, and this is my third final. And so I did that outline, and I was just beat, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I just turned in the outline, and I got a straight A. And I figured out later that these things are getting graded by TAs, teaching assistants, who are, trying to get their master's or doctorate. And they just want to find out if this little shit either knows the stuff or he doesn't. And so they don't care about anything except, they thought it was the greatest thing ever. This kid outlined it. He shows he knows what he's talking about. and he didn't bother writing all the bullshit in the blue book. And so from then on, I never filled out a blue book again. I used to just do the outline, turn it in, and I became a straight A student.
How about that? You didn't get the tutor to teach, and you didn't get kicked out of the school either. You just kind of figured out your own way to master the system, so to speak. And I guess next thing you know,
you're in a big class. That's how it worked.
No kidding. Yeah. They didn't have time to grade all those papers. I wish I would have known that. I should have talked to you, Rocky. How about that? How was baseball for you?
I lucked out into that one.
You didn't have any girls as a freshman. You learned a little bit later how to get the A's and the 4.0. What was baseball like for you? A little competitive, right? You were playing Stanford, SC, UCLA, Washington, or the Oregon schools, maybe Fresno. Tell me a little bit about what the baseball was like for you.
Yeah, Fresno was good. Santa Clara was good. The kids, Troutson was from Santa Clara. The ball was good. What you really find out is how many good ball players are out there. I remember we went down to a tournament in Riverside tournament in Southern California, and we got our ass handed to us by Chapman College, who I never even heard of. And it turns out, they play pretty much straight up with UCLA and SC down there, and good ball players. And I never even heard of Chapman College. And, so you find out, man, there's a lot of good ball players out there. And I remember facing, I think it was Randy Jones. Mm-hmm. And, he never threw hard in the big leagues, and he never threw hard getting all of us out of Cal. We faced him, and there's a lot of good ball players. At SC, they had who was the big home run hitter from 6'6", played for the
Kingman.
Oh yeah, Dave Kingman. He was a pitcher. He was a pitcher at SC. He could throw the hell out of the ball, but I guess he could hit it even further. But there's a lot of good athletes.
And of course, again, Bill Lee pitching at USC. So you faced him.
Yeah, Busby was there. Steve Busby. Yeah, SC they were loaded. They were always.
You guys had the likes of Mike Epstein and Andy Messersmith. You had some talent.
Bill Frost was a ball player. Yeah. Messersmith was he was the best athlete I ever saw, except for Jackie Jensen. But Andy Messersmith could do it all. Yeah.
How good were your teams at Cal during this period of time?
Well, let's see. When I guess the best year we had, we went 12-6, and we swept UCLA, we swept Stanford, and we got swept by SC. And we couldn't beat SC. We beat them. We should have played 6-inning games, because we were always, I think we were ahead in all 6 of those games in the 5th or 6th inning, but we couldn't close them out. And Dato is a great coach, and they had great pitching all the way through. And, we'd get through our starters, and, there's a reason we had relievers. They weren't good enough to start. But, at SC, the relievers were just every bit as good as the starters. They were just relievers. But our relievers were guys who couldn't start. And, so you went down a level when you got into the bullpen. And at SC, I don't think you did. I think maybe you went up a level. And that was a difference.
I mean, I think we had, actually, Harper, you had Bob Case a few weeks ago, and his guest was Jim Barr. And I listened to that. And Jim Barr was used mainly as a relief pitcher at USC. This guy is one of the great pitchers in the major leagues. And he was mainly used as a relief pitcher for the Trojans. So you're absolutely right, Rocky. You're talking about pitchers, the quality of a Jim Barr coming out of the bullpen. You got Busby, and you've got Bill Lee as starters, and you've got guys like Jim Barr and people like that coming out of the pen. So Yeah, there's no question that the game is played in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. That's when the game is won. You can't close it out. That's why closers are so important today. That's why they make the big money. But you showed a picture, and Logan, I think you can see that photo of the 1971 Cal team. Tell us about this series where George Wolfman takes Cal to Europe, and you play in Italy and you play Holland. It's interesting enough, I had a cousin who played baseball in Holland, so I was aware that they had baseball in Holland, in the Netherlands. So is this kind of tell us about the trip and the kind of baseball that was being played, and whether this was sort of the nexus or Rocky Shone deciding that he wants to someday, or he wants to play baseball in Italy. Did he even know that it existed before this?
Yeah, I don't think none of us knew. We went over there to play and work with the Italian national team to get the Italian national team ready to play against Holland. So we never left Italy, but we spent 6 weeks barnstorming and playing against the national team in Florence and Rome and Bologna and different places, Nettuno. And actually baseball started in Italy right after, or probably during World War II, because the American forces landed in Anzio right next to Nettuno. And a lot of our service members lost their lives there. And there's a American military cemetery in Anzio, and which I just visited. I went back to visit friends this last summer for a month, and I finally got to visit that cemetery. I lived there for 6 years and played in Nettuno 20 times, but I was playing. I never had time to go to, look around and be a tourist. So I finally got to the beautiful, beautiful cemetery. But the commandant or whoever the colonel who ran the cemetery was an avid baseball fan. And so he put in ball fields, and the American soldiers, of course, in their downtime would play ball. But he started teaching the Italian. He had a bunch of 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old Italian kids working for him, taking care of doing the work around the cemetery. And so I don't know how many employees he had, but they're all the right age. And he taught them how to play baseball. And so that was the birth of baseball, is in the Nettuno, Anzio area in Italy. And they started their first league probably 5-6 years later. And so they'd been playing since the late 40s, early 50s. And so we go over there in 71, and they're playing, they're pretty good. Let's put it that way. Pretty good. They don't have the Italian natural baseball player. They might have 2 or 3 good arms on the team, and they were the pitchers. Because you throw a ball to a kid in Italy, he steps away from it and kicks it with his feet.
Yeah.
They don't, they're soccer players by nature. And that's what they grow up. So you throw a ball to a kid here, they reach out with their hands and try to catch it, try to throw it back. Over there, they want to kick it to you. So, you had some hurdles to overcome. But anyway, we went over and we're teaching they had these, we were like the barnstorming team. So we'd get out there 2 or 3 hours before the game, and all the 12 and 13-year-olds and 11-year-olds, they'd come out, and we'd teach them how to hold the ball and throw the ball and hold the bat and swing the bat, and then would play against their national team. And their national team, they could hit the ball, they could field the ball. They did pretty much everything, but they didn't have great arms because they didn't learn how to throw until they were 12 or 13. That's all, Now they have great arms. They all throw correctly, But back then that was the weakness of Italian baseball was arm strength. And, yeah, so I went over, I was the captain of the Cal team, and I was actually graduating. I'd already graduated, and because I was a fifth-year senior, and because I'd missed a couple of years, got hurt. But I was captain of the team, and George brought me over, to kind of, I was the only senior like that on the team. All the other guys were, incoming sophomores, juniors, or seniors. And I was like senior leadership and the captain. And so I got to go with the team. And anyway, George was with his best friend, Bob Faggio, who was the coach at Bellarmine Prep down in San Jose. And they both had their wives. And so, except when we went to a big city, George and Bob and their wives would go travel around, and he made me the de facto coach, the player coach of the team. And anyway, we did real well. I don't think we lost the game. I refused to lose to Italians. I didn't know it just didn't seem right that we could lose a game to guys who didn't know how to play the game as well as we did. So, they had 38 players because they were picking the best cream of the crop, and we had maybe 18 or something, and 8 pitchers and 10 ball players. And so anyway, and we're playing double headers, getting their national team ready. And so we ran out of pitchers in a minute. But I'd go to my shortstop and say, "Come on, you used to pitch in grammar school or somewhere, right? You can pitch. You can get Italians out, can't you?" And we can't lose to these guys. Come on, suck it up. And anyway, we were undefeated, and we drove the Italians crazy because they couldn't beat us. But anyway, I guess they liked my style. I refused to lose, and was still playing at it was my swan song. I figured I was hoping to get signed. I got hurt as a senior, and had breakfast with one scout, lunch with another, and broke my finger against UC Davis in the afternoon. And that was I had one shot, and that was my shot because I was 23, and that's old to be signing. And the idea was they were gonna. I had enough units to graduate, so as soon as my last game, I was going to sign, and they're going to send me to a good A team or a low double A team, and give me a month. I'd either sink or swim. And the draft was in the end of June, and they were going to sign me in mid-May when the season was over. The Pac-8 season was over. We weren't going on, and I'd have 3, 4, 5 weeks to prove myself. And if I wasn't, ready at that level, that's where I should have been at that age. They'd release me and, draft a catcher. But anyway, none of that happened. I got hurt, broke a finger. And so anyway, I went to Italy, which was fun. And, but when I was over there, the guys started the Italians. We had a shortstop, they all, to me, they were all Italians, but I find out later he was actually from Venezuela and had signed with the Giants when he was 16, and he was of Italian heritage. So he was playing shortstop for the Italian national team, but he was really Venezuelan. And they had a good third baseman who was the first Italian to sign. He played with Johnny Bench in the minor leagues, and Alberto Rinaldi, and he played with the Reds organization. He was the first Italian to sign. Anyway, they were the two guys who recruited me to play for Bologna, and they said, "You want to come back and play?" I said, "I don't know, write me a letter." And so we started corresponding by letters, and by then I did so well helping coach in Italy. When I got back to the States, George moved Del Youngblood, who you knew.
Sure.
Del was the assistant on the varsity. He moved Del to the freshman team, and I became George's varsity assistant. And so George and I were the coaches on the varsity. And but anyway, I went back that one summer. I'd already signed a contract to come back to Cal, but I went just for one summer to play. And at the end of the summer, they fired the coach and made me the coach, and we won the championship. And they offered me a lifetime contract. They couldn't believe we won. So anyway, I called George and said, "What do I do, coach?" He said, "Well, you're a head coach in Italy. What the heck? Just stay there." And it was anyway. So I had room, board, and a car, and let's see. When I signed, I had room. When my first year, I was room, board, a car, and $500 a month, and from there, which wasn't bad because you didn't, really have any expenses, and but anyway, then I got quite a bit more for being the coach too. So it was a good gig. Yeah, I ended up getting married too.
Yeah. She mentioned the most important thing, didn't she?
Well, that was when I went back in '72, and I was I was just a player at the time, and we hadn't broken up, but she was pretty mad at me because when I left, it was like 2 or 3 days before her 21st birthday, and she said, "You can't wait for my 21st birthday," and I said, "No, we got games this weekend. I got to be there for the games. I'm a professional. I'm playing over there. I got to play." So she wasn't too happy that I was missing her 21st birthday. But
how about that?
Anyway, but we got over that, and she took me to the airport. I went over there, and I was there maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And of course, she promised she was going to wait for me. But man, she was the cutest thing ever. And there's no way she was going to try to wait, but the guys weren't going to wait for me to come back. They were going to be knocking on her door constantly for the next 3 months. So anyway, I started calling her and say, we can get married now. And she said, send me a ring, because at the time, as a young man, sometimes at night I would propose, and in the morning I'd say, "How the hell can we get married?" And I had no job, no way of it, no income, but finally now I'm playing ball, I'm getting paid, I'm living in Italy, I'm on my own. I'm thinking, yeah, I can swing it. So she came over and we got married in Florence in August of '72. My folks came over, and that's all that made it. And my pitcher and my shortstop were my best man, and and my interpreter or whatever. And we got married by the vice mayor of Florence and Palazzo Vecchio in Italy. Pretty romantic, pretty cool. And we had a game at 3. Got married at 11, game at 3.
Well, congratulations on the relationship and the marriage and all of that. And how much longer did you stay in Italy? And, how did the baseball grow? From an international perspective, this is all just grassroots stuff. And, Steven had mentioned earlier that the Italian team played well in the World Baseball Classic. It's been a while, but the game itself, instead of playing soccer, kids are starting to catch a ball and throw it back and throw it with a little velocity. So, how did the game develop in terms of, from your eyes, managing, playing, getting to see the development of the game?
Well, let's see. I was there for 6 years, from '72 through '77, and 5 years in Bologna, 1 year in Grosseto. Our team in Bologna, we lost our sponsorship that gave me the good contract. So I wasn't going to make much money. So I ended up trading myself to a team with a lot of money in Grosseto. And they had a nice ballpark. And I went down there and helped their program grow. But anyway, had 5 years in Bologna. And we won 2 Italian championships, came in twice, in second place twice. third place once in those 5 years, and won one European championship. And I at the time there was a kid, Dave Ferris, an All-American from Mississippi State. He was the player up in Milan, and I was playing in Bologna. We were the first two Americans recruited from the States to come over and play full time. Up till then, they'd find students who were like, Bologna had a big medical school. Bologna is the oldest university in the world. And they have a big medical school. I guess Guadalajara, Mexico, has the largest medical school outside the United States for American doctors. Bologna is number 2. So there's probably 300 or 400 Americans going to medical school. And some of those kids played ball. So some of those guys would, play baseball when they weren't going to med school. There's Vicenza wasn't too far away, American military base. Sometimes those guys would play. Steve Shedd was a great ball player from UCLA. He went over there, and somehow he ended up going back and playing a couple of times, but just for the summer. But Dave Ferris and I, we were the first two guys brought in to play. That was in 72. 73, everybody had an American or two. You couldn't pitch. You had to they had rules against pitching, being American, but you could play any other position. And then in 75, they lessened those rules. So if you were Italian American, meaning if you had Italian heritage, so Joe DiMaggio's kid could have played in Italy as an Italian, so to speak. Sure. So, in fact, I brought over a kid, Craig Minetto, he was from Stockton, and his signed, got hurt, and was released. And I saw him. I heard about him. I think I caught 3 pitches. I'd cut my finger, so I had a really bad on my catching hand, and I caught 1 or 2 fastballs, and I said, I've seen enough. And I brought him over, and he struck out 153 hitters in 110 innings or something like that, and came back and signed with the A's. And he spent 1 year in the minor leagues, and in 77 he debuted with the A's, and he had 4 years with the A's. So, baseball had picked up. And let's see, in 70, that was 75 when I had Craig. And the University of Arizona team had just won the College World Series. And they were on a barnstorming trip throughout Europe, and they came to Italy, and we played them. And I had Craig start, and he shut him down for 4 innings. And then I had a star left-handed pitcher as well. Craig was lefty, and then I had this guy, Kiko Corradini, who was a star on their national team, and he was my Italian pitcher, and he went 4 innings. And going into the 9th inning, we were beating Arizona like 3-2, and I had an old cagey veteran who couldn't break a pane of glass, but both these lefties could really throw heat, and I figured this old junk baller would get him out. We could get 3 outs. Anyway, I was wrong. Oh. And, they lit him up like a candle. And anyway, the balls were flying all over the yard. And we ended up losing that game. But anyway, we played a college team, the best college team straight up. And, we played Cuba. The national team had come over. The ball really picked up. Actually, in 74, we won the championship, and that was the first year the kid Jim Peretti played at Cal. That was his first year in Italy, and he pitched at Cal. And there's a team named Rimini, and at that year you could bring over Italian Americans. So they had, I think they had 2 or 3 Italian-born players. Everybody else was from New Jersey, New York. Jim Peretti was from, Cal, but pretty much everybody East Coast ball players. And they came in second to us. We beat them, but they were basically an American team playing as Italians. So I'd say it was, good college ball, low A ball,
I think this is around the time, I want to say around 74, 75, and I'm just a young guy watching, I think, baseball game of the week or Monday Night Baseball, something like that. And Joe Garagiola goes over to Italy, and he does a whole documentary and narrative of Italian professional baseball. This is where a lot of people learn about it, and this is where I first learned about you, because he interviews you. Tell us about Joe Garagiola coming over to Italy and interviewing you and what that did for exposure to Italian baseball.
Well, I just, I was in Italy, so I just heard about it, but all my friends started writing me letters. And, when I got home, everybody said, gee, I saw you on TV. You're a Joe Garagiola. And he was, what a great guy he was. And it was so much fun. And he came to the ballpark, and, he was in his 50s, but, he's in Italy, he's Italian.
Yeah.
And, so, I said, come on, put the gear on, put the, you want to, no, he didn't want to catch. You want to hit. Everybody wants to hit. Oh, yeah, I'll hit. So, he took, his turn at the plate, and, he's a big leaguer. He could play. And, he had so many great stories. He grew up with Yogi Berra and in St. Louis, and, they lived on the same street. And, he used to tell the story about, most kids who are in the big leagues are the greatest player, from their city or from their state or whatever. He says, hell, I wasn't even the best player on my street. Because of Yogi, but so we talked, this is on like a Wednesday or a Thursday, I can't remember, but he came to a practice. We had a good time at the practice. At the time, back then, we played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you played Friday night, Saturday night, and one game on Sunday. Three games a week is all we played. And everybody, I didn't work. I was the player from America, and my shortstop, Vic, the kid from Venezuela, he didn't have a full-time job. He just played baseball. But Toro Rinaldi, he was the guy who played with Cincinnati Reds. He had a job as a sales rep, and everybody else had jobs. So we used to work out. Our practices had started 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. The game started at 9. I trained myself. I never, when I was living in Italy, I trained myself never to go to sleep till 2 or 2:30 in the morning, because, in case we had a late game, I wanted to be wide awake at midnight. So I didn't want to be kind of sleepy, because I always went to bed at midnight. So, I never went to bed any day of the week until 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and wake up at 11 or 12 and train myself to, but my players couldn't do that. They had to get up at 8 and go to work. But anyway, Garagiola talks to me at the ballpark, and then 2 days later he does the interview, and he's so professional. Everything we talked about at the interview were things that we'd already talked about. He knew exactly the questions that asked me and the answers I was going to give, because we'd already done it 2 days before, except I didn't know we were doing it when we were doing it. And I got to see it later when, on tape, and man, he did a beautiful job. And that was a lot of fun. We later on, Tommy Lasorda came over 2 years later, and that's another great story. So, but anyway, But we had a lot of guys came over. You know, Enders came over. Al Enders.
Also, he had a friend, Al Enders, who was also Italian. His real name is Andrizzi. And he had a friend who was the baseball coach at College of San Mateo.
Right.
Do you remember his name? And was
Yeah.
he
Yeah, I can't think of it right now, but
Nave or
I saw him at he was at Al's funeral services
yes,
years ago.
yeah, and he coached there for years.
Yeah, he stayed mainly in Parma, about an hour away from Bologna, and yeah, I'll think of it after we hang up.
Well, Coach Enders came over.
Yeah, he coached the French team.
Well,
Al
that was long after you were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know that he did that. I don't know if you knew this, but I was an assistant at Cal, and Greg Zannino, who was a great star at Cal, played for the Yankees, and then had also played professional baseball in Italy. I think you were the one who set him up to do that. Yeah. He was approached to coach a baseball team in Berlin, Germany. And he didn't want to do it. And he asked me, and I actually did it. And so I spent a year in Berlin coaching international baseball. The idea was, I think that Berlin was hoping to get the Olympics in about 8 years, and they were thinking that there was going to be baseball in the Olympics. So they wanted to have a presence in baseball. And so they were bringing professional coaches from the United States to coach teams in Berlin. And it was exactly like you said. It was a German team, but the second baseman was from Nicaragua, or they had Cubans, and we had Koreans, and some of these guys were actual communists, because this was right around the time of the Berlin Wall, and so they had Koreans from North Korea, they had Cubans, and they had Nicaraguans who were Sandinistas. And I somehow figured a way to keep everybody on an even keel on this team, and so that was a lot of fun coaching those guys. I didn't know if you knew about that, but yeah, Greg Zannino, and there were a few others that I knew that I think you helped bring over to Italy. There was Greg Zannino. There was Alan Pasquinelli, who was a football player. I think he played at USF before he went to Italy.
Both Alan and Greg, they both got Italian wives.
That's right, they do. And my friend Danny Ferrano out of the University of Nevada, he played, I believe, for a guy named Beppe Gilizzoni in Novara. I want to say
that's up by Milan. I don't know him, but yeah.
Okay. Well, they actually called me when I was at USC and said, "Hey, we got a place for you." And I think Danny thought I could still throw. I had a torn rotator cuff, and I was in my last semester. I said, "Man, I've worked too hard to get this close to graduating from college. It's taken me 7 years. I'm not going to go back there. Plus, if I showed up, you'd be mad because I can't throw anymore. I'm not gonna, win the championship for you." So I had a chance to do that, and also to go to Mexico. I didn't want to do that either. Yeah. But yeah, so I had some background in international baseball. As you said, Coach Enders coached in France, and I coached in Germany, and you coached coached and played in Italy. My good friend Brad Cole, he was a very successful actor and musician in Paris. He played for years on teams in Paris. So, and as I mentioned earlier, my cousin played baseball in the Netherlands. So baseball is a very popular game, and and I tell you, just from the Germans that I knew, the ones who were on the team really just were crazy about baseball. Yes, most people are into soccer or some other sport, but baseball has a way of inching its way into your soul. And there were just some kids, whether they'd seen it on TV or they'd been to the United States, or for whatever reason, they just wanted to play baseball. And, obviously in Italy, from the experience of the Americans, and I think Joe DiMaggio played a huge role because he was an Italian baseball star. Getting back to Joe DiMaggio, I imagine you must have played a lot of semi-pro at Big Rec Park in San Francisco, where DiMaggio had played, and a lot of great players have played. And I played with Greg Zanino. I imagine you played at Big Rec Park. Is that true?
Yeah, that's when I was playing when I was telling you I was a kid playing for the San Anselmo Merchants. That's when we played. That was the Peninsula Winter League. And back then, Frank Robinson and Veda Pinson would show up and play. They played with the Oakland teams. And you didn't know it was Frank Robinson until someone told you. They're just another guy on the team. And they didn't stand out. It wasn't like they were, so far ahead of everyone else. They just looked like another ball player. But if it was late in the game and it was a close game and it really counted, then all of a sudden, they got their competitive juices flowing. And then all of a sudden, Frank Robinson had hit a rocket somewhere, or they were, back then during the winter, they're just playing with their buddies. These are all guys they grew up with and played with, and I think they pretty much got shamed into playing. Big leaguer now, you won't play with us anymore. And so they didn't come out all the time, but they'd come out and play in the winter league with these guys, and keep. Back then, all the the big leaguers now, big contracts. Back then, guys had most of the guys. Remember John Bacabella,
Sure,
from Marin County. Those guys all would get jobs driving UPS trucks normally. That's where I first met John Bacabella, who was delivering packages. And they'd work at a as a greeter at a auto agency or something. And but yeah, so anyway, some of the great players would play in these winter league games.
I remember Keith Hernandez at Big Rec Park. I remember Mike Norris at Big Rec Park, and probably a few others.
Scooty Babbitt. Remember
Well,
him?
I played in the minor leagues with Shooty Babbitt.
Oh, okay.
And so I knew him. And I pitched in a major league spring training exhibition game speaking of Frank Robinson, against the San Francisco Giants, with Frank Robinson being the manager of the Giants. It was an unbelievable day. Struck out 7 batters in 3 innings. It was unbelievable. It was just a dream. And Shooty Babbitt was my shortstop. Shooty Babbitt, Harper, played at Berkeley High School, which was a school that we played in baseball, basketball, and football every year when I was at Redwood. They were a big rival. Excellent ball player, played to the majors, and became a longtime scout, and I still think he still hosts the A's or the Sacramento A's, television pregame show or postgame program or something. But I don't remember playing with Shooty in San Francisco. I probably did, but I remember him from high school and the minors.
Well, I just remember him playing over there.
Yeah, excellent ball player. Yeah, very good ball player.
By then I was playing for Mr. B's.
Did you play with Tony Girallis and those guys with Mr. B's?
I coached. I played, but I came back from Italy, and my dad died unexpectedly at 62 in December of 77, and so I never went back to Italy. My wife and I were trying to decide. We had a 1-year-old boy, and we're trying to decide to go back or not, because if we kept going back to Italy, his native language was going to be Italian, and not probably not English. So, we had to decide what we were going to do. And then my dad died and kind of made the decision for us, so we never went back. But yeah, I don't know where I was leading. But
well, I mentioned Tony Giralis.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So then that guy, Joe Anselmo, became the coach at Redwood High School. And so he called me, I think that was in 78 or maybe 79. He became the coach. Well, anyway, it was Tony Giralis' senior year.
Yeah.
And I coached him at Redwood. And so I coached the catchers and the hitters, and Bill Lee coached the pitchers. And Bill we were the two assistants for Joe Anselmo.
That's unbelievable. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Tony Giralis. This is the California State Joe DiMaggio tournament. Okay.
He's a good ball player.
Great. My dad, he was a great player. My dad was the manager of Redwood's summer team, which was called Italian Club. We are playing a team called the Long Beach Jets. It's a bunch of kids from like Long Beach Poly High and Millikan High and several high schools down in Long Beach, Orange County area. And Tony is pitching, and I'm injured. This is my junior year, and I can't pitch. And so Tony really kind of has to take the burden. He's got a nice 2-1 lead in the bottom of the 7th. All we got to do is get these guys out. They put a couple guys on base, and a left-handed hitter comes up, and he hits one off of the scoreboard at Albert Park, and 2 runs score. And Long Beach Jets beat Italian Club 3-2. That hitter was Tony Gwynn. And later on, I wrote an article for some publication called Tony Gwynn versus Tony Giralis. And it still gets circulated around. But yeah, that was Tony
great
playing out of Albert Field. A lot of great players played at Albert Field.
Oh, yeah. Boy. Yeah, when I was coming up, that year I was playing for Joe Anselmo. I'd hurt my arm and hadn't played for a couple of years, and we had a guy named Rich Jeffries was our second baseman, and he played at SF State. And when I told Joe Anselmo, the coach, I couldn't really throw. He said, "Don't worry, I'm gonna put you out in right field." And it turned out later they got my arm fixed. But he said, Rich Jeffries, he'll come out and meet you out there. He's got a great arm. And anyway, Rich Jeffries is the dad of Greg Jeffries.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, Greg Jeffries, he's one of the best hitters that is not known. I mean, I think he had 345 one year for St. Louis. He had a couple of big 300 years. And I don't know what really, he had a very successful career, but I think they expected him to be a Hall of Famer. So, he's kind of a guy who didn't live up to his, he was 2-time minor league player of the year. Only person ever to be a 2-time minor league player of the year. And, but anyway, that was Rich Jeffries' son, Greg, who was he was a tyke when we first met. Yeah, that guy, he's still, he's coaching hitting somewhere. Guy could hit. He had the really short, compact stroke. He struck out when guys were starting to strike out. Now guys strike out 100 times a year and don't think anything of it, 150 times a year. He'd strike out 20 times in a season, 25 times. He's like Tony Gwynn. He's just going to strike them out. So I think he hit, Maddox couldn't get him out. He was like, I don't know, 18 for 30 off of Greg Maddox or something. I mean, That's how you tell how, who couldn't get him out. And if somebody that good couldn't get you, I used to ask Bill Lee who he couldn't get out, and he named some guys you never even heard of.
Yeah.
Bill, I think, got out the good hitters.
I used to love what Bill would say. The only thing you know about pitching is you can't hit it, he would say. Greg Jeffries played at Sarah High School, where Barry Bonds played, where Jim Fregosi played, where where Tom Brady played. John Robinson went to school there, played there. Yeah, it's a legendary high school. Yeah. I think he was there in the 80s and played in the late 80s. I think he played for the Mets when a couple of those teams were in the playoffs, 80, 86, 88, during that period of time.
Yeah,
So
he played with the Mets. Yeah, he played with Keith Hernandez and Gary Hernandez. When I was at Cal, Gary Hernandez was when he was a sophomore, he hit 11 triples. He made All-American. I was the senior captain, and Gary was our first baseman, and really a good hitter. And then the next year I'm coaching at Cal, and Gary is now a junior, and his brother Keith is in high school, and he was a great 3-sport star in high school: football, basketball, baseball, and just finished basketball season. And the coach, he's playing a baseball game, and the coach wants him to pitch. And he says, "Well, I can't pitch, coach. I haven't thrown a ball since last summer. I'm not ready to pitch." And I'm the coach. I'm telling you to go in and pitch. And he says, "No, I'm planning on playing beyond high school, and I'm not going to pitch. I'm not going to blow my arm up." And anyway, they had a big argument, and he didn't play his senior year in high school. And he was the last player drafted in the draft when he got drafted. And he ended up signing, I forget what, he got some fancy sports car after he signed. He got like, big money. Like he got first round money because he was that good. They knew how good he was.
Yeah.
They knew his talent. And, but anyway, because his dad used to come and work with the hitters at Cal, and everyone wanted to listen to his dad because
he's very intense guy.
Yeah, how well, his son Gary was hitting. Anyway, Keith came out. Keith was 17. He was young for his senior year. He was 17-year-old high school kid, and he was already better than Gary.
No.
And Gary was a 20-year-old junior All-American. That's how good Keith Hernandez was. The guy hit the ball all over the yard with, the ball just jumped off his bat.
Plus he could pick it too.
Oh, you couldn't tell that because he was mainly, taking BP. But, nothing like watching him in the big leagues playing first base. Nobody plays first base like that. Guys are trying to, but he could do it all. He was a great athlete.
Well, you guys have certainly had some amazing stories and coincidences, and you mentioned Greg Jeffries. I've got one of his bats in the other room that was signed. I don't have a big collection, but for obvious reasons, going down memory lane. If you don't mind, Rocky, give me a perspective of where you think Italian baseball is now, and where it compares from. Let's not go back to when you were first starting in the early '70s, but how does it compare with some of the other world leaders, the Japanese clubs, or what Korea is doing, and obviously Canada, Venezuela has some great teams. There's all kinds of different fantastic teams in the Central Americas, and the island nations. So, what's your perspective tell you?
Yeah, I wish I had better news to report. I was just over there, and I went over to visit friends. I was there from the 23rd of September to the 24th of October. Went by myself. My wife really didn't want to, when I'm over there, I'm just buddying up with all my old ball players and such. And she decided she didn't want to, come this time. But I want to make sure we're all getting up in years. So I want to make sure. I was the youngest guy in the team when I was coaching over there. When I first started coaching, I was 24. So a lot of my players were 28, 30. So I want to make sure I saw them all. So I went back over, and they're all still involved with baseball. A lot of these guys their kids are playing. So anyway, they brought me out to the yard, and so I swung the bat some and threw the ball some, and gave some tips and pointers and such. But so position-wise, the players are getting better all the time. But they started bringing over Italian-American pitchers, and the weakest part of their game is still the weakest part of their game, which is the arm strength. They still don't have great arms, and so they hit, field, and run just like Americans, but they don't throw as well as we do. I guess they all, Barry Bonds, they all talked about what a great outfielder he was, and he was, but he didn't have his dad arm. They all have kind of Barry's arm. They don't have Bobby's arm, and so it's all serviceable, but that's the weakest part. But because of that, they don't have great pitchers, because that's all arm and pitching, and in baseball, if you have a good enough pitcher, you win, pretty much. It's 90% of the game, right? 90% of the other's mental, 50% mental, whatever Yogi said. But
90% mental, the other half is physical. Yeah, that's the way Yogi put it.
Which is somehow that's true, and but yeah, so baseball is not progressing as well as I would hope. In Holland and Italy are still the powers in European baseball. They play now, and they played when I was there in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in England, and they weren't any good. And now they're better than they were, but they're still not any good. They're better. They might be good, but Holland plays at a high level, and Italy plays at pretty much the same level. I'd say Holland, I don't know. I haven't followed them over the years, but Holland probably wins 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5, something like that against Italy. I would say Holland is still a little bit better, and it's because, I don't know if you've ever been to Holland, but
I have.
Anyway, you'd be a small man in Holland, Harper. I mean, there are big people over there. You're 6'4", 6'5"?
I'm 6'4",
yeah. So and Steve, how tall are you? You're even taller.
6'6".
Yeah.
Almost.
So you're more Hollandaise. Big, strong, athletic people, and they throw well, and so they pitch better than the Italians, and I think the Italians can beat them in every other part, but they don't have the pitching. So and we played when we were there. We played against the Cubans.
Mm-hmm.
We played against the Japanese. We played against Taiwan. Taiwan used to come over. China hadn't. I guess China's playing pretty good baseball now, and Korea wasn't anything back then, back in the 70s. But I remember that Japanese baseball, they'd come and they'd come to our ballpark at Bologna. It was a big, beautiful ballpark, and they'd go out to warm up and they'd go out and do long toss. And I used to coach long toss. I think it's important. And I'd stress it. And we did it all the time. And we would stand about 8 or 10 feet apart because guys' balls tail when they play long toss. And when Japanese players play long toss, they're at about a 3 or 4 foot spacing, and they throw line drive, straight as a string, back and forth, 120 feet. Everybody's standing this far apart, and it's impressive. And because they do it every day, and they throw every day. It's I'm a big fan of Japanese baseball. They think it. It doesn't just happen. They got a lot of planning into their game. They do a lot of things that we just don't see. We've lost bunting in the United States. Every once in a while somebody has to lay down a bunt, and every once in a while they do. But in Japan, they lay it down. They don't foul off bunt attempts. I mean, if you can catch it, you should be able to bunt it, because that's all you're doing is catching the ball with the bat. And I used to coach it that way. I used to put a left-handed glove on guys and have them catch the ball, and then put the bat in their hand, and you're doing the same thing. And they'd never miss it with the glove in their hand, and they'd miss it with the bat. So because they'd try to bunt it instead of catching it. And you catch a bunt, you don't bunt a bunt. Anyway, you get back into my coaching things. But anyway, Japanese baseball, one of the great things that I learned in Japanese baseball, one time we're playing them, and you know how you do an inward turn as a hitter? So the guy does an inward turn, and then he drops the bat down, and he does a drag bunt. And it was a beautiful thing. And you never see that in the States. Third baseman is not charging. Over here, you teach this in the States. When you want a drag bunt, you come over and you bring the bat back. Over there, they do an inward turn and drop the bat behind him. You can't even see it. And you do a drag bunt that way. The third baseman doesn't see it till it's rolling down the third baseline. Yeah, great ball.
Well, appreciate the tips and all of that. So a lot of things going on in that. Steven, final words from you.
Well, I think we've covered most of the bases here. The excellent overview and retrospective of international baseball with Rocky Shone, with the emphasis on Italian baseball, but also Cuban, Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese. I had some experience playing against Taiwan. They were really, really good. I don't know if they're as good now as they were then, but they were really good. The Asians really love baseball, and you're absolutely right, Rocky. They take it very seriously. They practice it with vigor. But I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Take 5 with Steven Travers. We really enjoyed having you. And, next week we're going to have, again, we're going to look at an international aspect of the game. This time Japan with Derek White, major league player who's now a scout for professional baseball in Japan. But I want to thank you so much, Rocky, for being our guest.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Harper.
You as well, Rocky. We appreciate all of the great stories from the early days. Obviously, you're collegiate, and remember, kids, open the book. It's okay to open the book and then put the outline there in your blue book test. You'll get an A every time. You'll work all that. But we thank you for all
the work everywhere.
Well, thank you also for all that you've done for the game, Rocky. Your commitment to baseball and especially at the international level, where you've got people from all over the world in one way, shape, or form liking or even loving the game even more. Thank you for all of that. That really, you've contributed to the embetterment of the game, and you are to be thanked and appreciated. So we salute you with that. And we also wanted to say thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. This has been Take 5 with Steven Travers. Today's guest is Rocky Shone, a Cal Berkeley Bear, a Northern California kid that ended up going over and playing overseas for years and managing and winning championships abroad. So we thank Rocky for being a part of the show. For Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for Steven Travers, who's the star of Take 5 with Steven Travers, I'm Harper LeBel saying thank you for tuning in, everybody. We really appreciate it. If you like the show, please like and subscribe. We'd love for you to tell a friend as well. In the meantime, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.